Hey everyone, so it's Hearth and welcome back to my channel. So on today's video, we are going to be talking about the different types of witches. So this has been such a highly requested topic that I just had to make a video about it, but there are a few things that I want to mention before we get into the full lists of witches. Now the first thing is that this is not a fully comprehensive list. This is simply the most popular varieties or types of witches that you're likely to find. There are far more different varieties, and of the varieties that I'm going to be talking about, there are many different names for these specific types of witches. So for example, a hearth witch also goes by the term cottage witch, and so on and so forth. So if you don't find a specific type of witch in this list, it's either because it's quite uncommonly found or it goes by a different name. Now the next thing that I want to talk about is the fact that you don't have to fit into one of these categories. It's not a requirement. When you start practicing witchcraft, you don't already have to know the type of witch you want to become. It's actually something that you tend to fall into as you're continuing your practice. As you learn what you enjoy doing and what you don't enjoy doing, as you learn the kinds of things that you're good at and the kind of things you're not so good at, you generally tend to find yourself drawn into categories, and they definitely aren't a requirement. To be a witch, you don't have to select a category. Some people choose to describe their practice as a very specific category because it's easier for other people to understand. So for instance, for me, when I'm talking to other people and they ask me what type of witchcraft I practice, I will tell them that I'm a hearth witch, because that very much narrows down the type of practice that I undertake. Just as if someone was to ask a fairy practitioner what kind of magic they practice, if they were to tell them that they were a fairy witch, that immediately lets the other person know the kind of practice that they undertake. You should definitely not box yourself into a category if you don't need to. These are just good examples for the classifications of different types of witches that a lot of people go by. Okay, disclaimer over, let's get on to the list of different types of witches. So the first four categories I'm going to be talking about are secular, religious, solitary, and group. These are not necessarily types of witches in themselves, but are instead methods of practicing other paths and traditions. So you can be a secular witch and also a green witch, a hearth witch, a hedge witch, a sea witch, just as you can be a group or coven witch as well as a green witch, sea witch, air witch, etc. They are instead additions to your practice. Some people will follow them, some people won't. It really is a case of personal choice. The first thing is secular. Essentially, this means that you don't follow a god or gods. You are non-religious in your practice. This can be applied to almost all of the types of witches that you will find, unless they already include a religion. So for instance, Wicca witchcraft. You can't be secular and following Wiccan witchcraft because there is a religious attachment to it. Now the second thing is religious. Essentially, you believe and follow a god or multiple gods, goddesses. This is another one of those where you can attach it to any of the types of witches I'm going to be talking about later on in this video. It's an addition, an extra layer to your personal practice. So the third thing is solitary. All of the types of witches I'm going to be talking about, you can practice as a solitary practitioner working by yourself, as well as a group practitioner or a coven practitioner, where you work alongside other people, you raise energy together, you release energy together, you gain results together. These four aspects are simply additions. So for instance, I am a solitary religious hearth witch. They are additions to the type of witch that I personally choose to practice. You can pick and choose from these, and generally people will change from one thing to another, from one type of witchcraft to another throughout their lives. So don't feel as though you have to be set on a specific title, because they definitely are not required. They're just nice additions to have to easily categorize and explain your personal practice. So the first type of witchcraft on this list is air witchcraft. Now this is generally practiced by people who are very closely connected to the air element, either through their zodiac sign or simply through an energetic connection. Now, air witches generally undertake all of their workings utilizing the element of air in some way, shape, or form. This can be anything from incense magic to breath meditations. It is an integral core part of their personal practice. These people can then choose to work with deities connected to the air, with elementals or elemental spirits connected with the air element. It's a very specific practice that not that many people follow, but is actually really, really interesting. Now, the next thing is a cosmic witch. Now, these are practitioners that work primarily with planetary or cosmic energies. They work closely with the cycles of the moon, with solar energy, with planetary energies. They may be very deeply connected to astrology and understanding the placement of the planets and how they affect our lives. They also likely work very closely with comets and unique events that don't happen very often, such as supermoons, blood moons, comets, eclipses. They are very deeply connected with space and use it as a primary aspect of their personal practice. Now, the next type of witch is a crystal witch. Now, I know that a lot of practitioners have crystals, but a crystal witch goes above and beyond the normal when it comes to working with crystals. Almost everything they undertake in their personal practice has something to do with crystals. They likely undertake crystal meditations, are very successful at crystal therapies, use crystals as charms, as talismans, work with them in spell work and rituals, leave them as offerings. They are the core aspect of their personal practice, and if you were to take the crystals away, they would no longer be able to undertake their chosen style of practice. Now, the next is a draconic witch. Now, draconic witches work solely with dragonic energies. They work with dragon spirits. Dragon spirits, dragon energies. They call on them, they evoke them, or even invoke them during spellwork and ritual. They undertake dragonic meditations. Some of them even travel or astral travel to the astral or spiritual planes to have a spiritual connection with dragons and their specific energies. Now, dragonic witches are often very closely connected with draconic otherkin, and you'll often find that a lot of practitioners work very, very closely with dragonic energies within their own lives as well as within their spiritual and magical lives. Now, the next is an earth witch. Much like an air witch, an earth witch is very, very deeply connected with the earth, whether through their zodiac and astrology or simply through an energetic connection. These practitioners undertake all of their workings in association with the earth element, whether that be burying their workings, undertake nature magic, whether that be connecting with earth deities like Gaia, or even connecting with earth elementals and earth spirits. Everything they do in their practice is very deeply rooted and deeply connected to the earth element, and they likely wouldn't feel comfortable practicing if they didn't have access to the earth or connection to the earth in some way. Now, the next is an eclectic witch, likely one of the most commonly found varieties of witches. I myself was an eclectic witch once upon a time, and they are generally practitioners that pick and choose aspects of different paths to form their own unique practice. Now, it's important to note here that they should really only be selecting aspects of open practices and open traditions, not closed ones. But regardless, an eclectic witch is someone that picks and chooses different aspects from different paths and traditions to form their own unique practice. And you will likely never find two eclectic witches with the same practice in the entire world. It is very, very unlikely because they tailor everything they do to suit themselves so perfectly. Now, generally, almost everyone begins their practice into witchcraft as an eclectic witch until they find a very specific path or practice that they feel really, really drawn to. So generally, most people at some point have been an eclectic witch before moving on to another form of practice. Now, similar to air and earth witches are elemental practitioners. These are those that are connected to all of the elements, that work easily and effectively with every single element. And they incorporate them in their spells and rituals. They utilize fire magic, earth magic, air magic, and water magic, as well as invoking them into ceremonial circles when you call in the quarters, working with elemental spirits, working with elemental deities, and so on and so forth. They are more general than single element practitioners, but still solely work with the elementals and the elements within their workings, and you will rarely find an elemental practitioner undertaking a working without connecting with at least one element before and during the working. So a fairy witch. A fairy witch is a practitioner that works with the spiritual beings known as the Fae, fair folk or fairies. They really do work with them in almost every single working they undertake, calling on their energies, leaving them offerings, having altars. They often have fairy gardens outside to connect with them, and some practitioners even undertake travel to the fairy realms to work with them in their own realm as well as in our realm. Now, it is quite unusual to find a fairy practitioner doing workings without the assistance of the Fae. Often they always ask for the assistance of either the Fae within their home, within their local area, or Fae that they have had a very special connection with during travels or specific fairy meditations. So it's quite unusual to find them doing workings without the assistance of the Fae in some way, shape or form. Now, the next type of witch is a fire witch. Much like the practitioners that work with earth and air, a fire witch is very deeply connected to the fire element, either through their zodiac or astrology or simply through an energetic connection. They almost always utilize and work with the elemental energy of fire within their practice, often working with candle magic, cauldron magic, burning of sigils and undertaking other fire type rituals, often being very closely connected to an athame or a wand as representations of the fire element. Now, fire practitioners also often work with fire elementals, fire spirits and fire deities depending on how they choose to tailor their personal practice. Now, next is a green witch. A green witch is a very traditional form of witch. They are an individual that works very, very closely with nature and so are often also known as nature witches. They are witches that often very closely connect to farmland and woodland and meadows, places quite far away from civilization. They often will find themselves in city gardens or city parks to get that taste of nature that they can't get in an urban environment. They often work with herbs, are very good at herbology, working with flowers and tree energies and nature spirits. Almost all of their workings will have some aspect of nature in it, whether that be stones, whether that be dirt, or wood, or herbs, or nature spirits. There's always something very deeply connected to nature within their personal practice. Now, a hearth witch, also known as a cottage witch by some individuals, is a person that practices witchcraft surrounding the home and hearth. Unlike a green witch that might undertake rituals within a natural environment, a hearth witch is more likely going to be doing it on their living room floor. They much prefer being homebodies, doing every bit of their working inside their home, for their home and the people that they genuinely care about. It's often a blend of green witchcraft and kitchen witchcraft together in its own unique homebody practice. They undertake kitchen magic for the people they care about, but also undertake home charms, talismans that people can take around with them, amulets, protections. They tend to be workers that work primarily with their hands, connecting with the things that they use around them all of the time. Definitely homebodies. Hearth witches tend to stick to working within the home, for the home, with the items found within the home. So next is a hedge witch. A hedge witch is a really traditional form of witch. Generally, they were considered the wise folk back through history, but a hedge witch is a blend of green witchcraft and spirit work. Their entire practice is walking the hedge between the spirit world and the physical world. They often have a really in-depth knowledge of plants, of herbalism, of natural medicine, but equally they astral project or hedge ride, travelling in between different planes, working with spirits and spiritual energies as they go. They're a really interesting blend of herbalism and natural green witchcraft, as well as more astral work and spirit work. So they're a really fascinating and very traditional form of witchcraft. So next is a hereditary witch. Now, although there are many people who claim to be hereditary witches that have had witches in their family lineage, what I specifically mean by a hereditary witch is that they have been taught by members of their own family. Generally, this is found in families where they have a mother, a grandmother, or an auntie that is a practitioner, and they are taught by those family members everything within their practice. And because of this, hereditary witches tend to have historical spells and rituals and family recipes passed down through the generations that they then use within their personal practice. Now, there are hereditary witches that aren't taught by their family members and end up in a different path. Those aren't specifically what I'm talking about in this very specific type of witch. What I mean is simply that everything they know has been taught from people who've practiced before them. So it's very much a family tradition where what they practice is only practiced within their specific family. Now, the next type of witch is a kitchen witch. These are very, very popular nowadays because it's easy and highly, highly effective. A kitchen witch is a practitioner that imbues everything that they make in the kitchen with their own magic. Whether that be tea, whether that be healing soup or a roast dinner, guaranteed a kitchen witch, if necessary, will be adding their own energies and intentions into what they're doing. They're likely going to mix up teas based on their intention with different types of herbs. They're going to be adding sigils into teacups. They're going to be stirring up soup with potential intention. Everything they do is done with a real purpose, and it's done easily, effectively and discreetly within their own home. Kitchen witches often also utilise items they have around them as their magical tools. So their wooden cooking spoon has become their wand, their kitchen knife has become their athame, their kitchen shelf has become their kitchen altar, and they often work with kitchen deities and fae and spirits within the home if they choose to. So it's definitely a very useful and varied practice that a lot of people nowadays are being really drawn to. So next are lunar practitioners. Now these are individuals that are very deeply connected with lunar energy. They work with the moon phases during spells and rituals, they charge their crystals by moonlight, and every working that they do is very perfectly timed to connect with the suitable lunar energy for their particular working. They are often individuals that draw energy solely from the moon rather than from other sources such as the earth or crystals or tools. So they are a very specific practice within witchcraft that is definitely very popular as appreciation for the moon is increasing. Now next is a pop culture witch. This is becoming more and more popular nowadays. Essentially, a pop culture witch is an individual that draws on pop culture references within their magical practice. I actually did a whole video on using Harry Potter in pop culture witchcraft if anyone wants to check that out. I'll put the card up here, I think it's here, but I'll put the card up there anyway if anyone is interested if you are a pop culture witch in taking some ideas from Harry Potter. But Harry Potter is just one of the many sources that pop culture witches are getting their inspiration from. Whether it be Sabrina the Teenage Witch or whether it be from Charmed, pop culture witches have been around for as long as pop culture has been, and it's a really interesting practice. They take fantasy ideas and fantasy TV shows, but they really creatively twist everything so it's very suitable for real life, genuine practice. So if you're really interested in watching films like The Craft or Practical Magic, then pop culture witchcraft could be for you if you're interested in incorporating that into your actual real life practice. Now the next is a sea witch or an ocean witch. Now this is similar to a green witch where they are very closely connected to a specific environment, in this case water or oceans. Now there are other varieties of sea witches. There are stream witches or lake witches or river witches, but this very specifically is for sea witchcraft and sea witches. These are individuals that are deeply connected to the ocean, to the tides, to the currents, whether that be to oceans in general or a very specific ocean that they have access to. They work their energy based on the sway of the tides and the working of the moon. They often utilise oceanic deities and spirits and tools that come from the sea, so you'll likely find them having spiritual baths in the ocean, using seaweed and seashells and driftwood within their personal practice. There's a lot you can do with some sea salt and some seaweed, believe me, and sea witches definitely make the most of the ocean that they have around them. Next is a solar witch, almost the opposite of a lunar witch. A solar witch works solely with solar energy. They are often very closely connected with the sun and use it to charge their crystals to work their energy with. Often undertaking spell work best when it's hot and sunny. They draw energy from the sun rather than from other sources and undertake their workings based on the placement of the sun in the sky. Actually a really interesting practice that is not talked anywhere near enough about in comparison to lunar witchcraft. So if you're interested in solar magic, it's definitely something to look into. So next is a sigil witch. Now sigil witches are the type of practitioners that enjoy just quick, simple magic. Using sigils in every single one of their workings, they can range from simply doing sigils on a piece of paper and burning them, all the way up to complicated sigil-based witchcraft utilising tools and candles and incense and items, all focusing that energy on a single sigil. It's a more modern practice that's starting to become more and more popular as sigil making is becoming more and more commonly found, and it can be a very powerful but quick form of witchcraft if you're interested. As you know, there's lots of different ways of making sigils, and sigil witches tend to incorporate every possible way of making sigils into their personal practice, making it as simple or as complex as they want their sigil magic to be. Now next is a spirit worker. Now a lot of spirit workers don't call themselves witches, they are simply spirit workers, but I still wanted to incorporate it into this list because a lot of people do enjoy undertaking spirit work within their personal practice. Spirit working is essentially the connecting with and the working with spirits in your personal practice. Often offerings are left, whole altars are set up in connection and dedication to a single spirit or to multiple spirits. These can be to ancestors or to specific spirits of your choice. Offerings are left of special waters or wines or alcohols, and they are drawn on for spells and rituals with the promise of offerings and dedication being given in response. It is a very dedicated practice where the worker is devout in leaving offerings for a specific amount of time or in specific quantities to offer that spirit something in return for their assistance. It is a very old school, very traditional form of magic that is found literally all over the world. From Australia all the way across to America, it is found everywhere, and it is definitely a very, very traditional and very important practice to a lot of traditions. So if you're wanting to undertake some more traditional practices, spirit work might be something for you to look into. Now next is a tech witch. Now these are individuals that feel most comfortable undertaking all of their workings from the confide of their phone or computer. They generally have digital books of shadows, digital altars. Their spell work is done and charged through technology, through mobile phones, from computers, through faxes, anything they can think of. They choose to undertake their workings solely from the insides of technology. It's a very, very fascinating form of practice that is a lot more modern than almost everything else on this list. But if you are very closely connected to technology and you enjoy working with it, then a tech witch might just be the kind of path that you're going to want to go down. So next is an urban witch. Now an urban witch is a really fascinating form of practice that not enough people talk about. They work with very traditional ideas but utilise their urban environment to their best advantage. They charge sigils in a street where they can get run over by loads of different cars. They take drain water to use in curses and hexes and crossings. They utilise the environment around them, the bad and the good, to charge and manipulate the energy to gain a magical response. Now it is a wonderful method of practice for people who don't have access to lots of greenery, they don't have access to loads of herbs. Instead they work with what they have in their very urban environment to undertake successful and very powerful magical practice. I know of some people who live in the middle of New York who undertake witchcraft in this way to have some fantastic results. So if you live in an urban environment, maybe urban witchcraft is the way to go. It's definitely a more modern form of practice, but it's definitely something that more people should look into. So next is the water witch. Much like the air, earth and fire practitioners, a water witch is someone that is very closely connected to the water element, either through their zodiac and astrology or through an elemental energetic connection. Now water witches almost practice solely through their use of the water element. They work a lot with chalices, they work a lot with running water and spiritual baths and shower magic. They work a lot with spiritual energy of water, with the elementals, with the spirits and with deities of water. So if you're very connected to water but aren't specifically drawn to something like river witchcraft or sea witchcraft, water witchcraft could definitely be something to look into. Now the last thing on this list is Wiccan witchcraft. Now I've included this solely because not everyone that follows the Wiccan religion chooses to go in depth into witchcraft, but some practitioners do. So Wiccan witchcraft has become a type of witchcraft in itself that a lot of people practice. It utilises the god and the goddess energy from Wicca, as well as the casting of the circles, the calling and the quarters, the Wiccan reed, and incorporates it into traditional witchcraft. And often the witchcraft that is utilised in Wiccan witchcraft is very traditional British witchcraft. It's very old school, very ceremonial, calling in and invoking and evoking deities and spirits and leaving offerings. It's a very traditional, say traditional, but it's a very neo-traditional form of practicing witchcraft if you are also Wiccan and want to include your religion in your personal practice. Now that is my list of the different types of witches that are quite common to find, but don't forget that this is definitely not an extensive list and there are far more different varieties. I've tried to put some good links down in the description box for anyone that's interested in learning more. And if you would like me to do any full videos on a particular type of witchcraft with some ideas of how you can practice it, for altar layouts, for divination methods, etc, etc, then please let me know down in the comment section of any specific types of witchcraft you would like to learn a little bit more about. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, feel free to give it a like. I really appreciate it. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, video ideas, or just want to chit chat down in the community, down in the comment section, feel free to post a comment. I do try to respond or get back to as many people as I can. It does just take me a little bit longer than it used to because there are quite considerably more of you than there were when I first started. And if you enjoy the magical content in this video or on this channel, feel free to hit subscribe. It really means so much to me that our little community is growing. So I hope you guys have a marvellous magical day, and I will see you in the next video on either Wednesday or Saturday at 6 p.m. Bye!